Thank you, everyone. I hope that the coffee break was a good chance to get outside, get some fresh air, hopefully get some caffeine. And I am pleased to announce the third and final panel for today's session, Traditional Stewardship of Natural Resources. I'd first like to invite up our two moderators for this session, Mr. Nguyen Tang and Ms. Aminta Amy Permpoonwiwat. Mr. Tang is the director of the Center for Research and Promotion of Cultural Heritage of Vietnam and the Vietnam director for the Southeast Asian Cultural Heritage Alliance. A certified UNESCO trainer for intangible cultural heritage, Mr. Tang has an expertise in heritage education, museum studies, and cultural development and gender. And he formerly served as the National Program Officer of Culture at UNESCO's Hanoi office. Ms. Amy is a member of the Youth Driving Committee for the Southeast Asian Cultural Heritage Alliance and the project manager and founder of Youth Mentorship Project, a youth organization dedicated to teaching students from vulnerable groups the values of sustainability and resilience through STEM subjects. She represented Thailand at the UN Youth for Climate Conference in 2021 and 2022 and is interested in the intersection between quality education, inequality, and climate action. Please welcome our two moderators. I would also like to invite to the stage our three speakers for this panel, Dr. Tint Nguyen Tang, Dr. Nurul Salmi Abdul Latip, and Dr. Suwichan Phatthanaphraiwan. Please take to the stage. Thank you. Please join me in welcoming our three speakers. Without further ado, I'd like to turn things over to our moderators and begin this final session of the day. Thank you.
Thank you. The panel today, the last one today, is the traditional stewardship of natural resources. So today's panel will bring us to another dimension of the conference, local knowledge and traditional practices that bring us to the stewardship by the local communities. Today we have three representatives from Malaysia, from Thailand, and Myanmar who will give us astonishing stories about how the traditional knowledge practices are in the guardianship of the natural resources. So I would like to leave the floor to the first presenter.
Okay, so before we give the floor, I would like to introduce our very first speaker, Dr. Tint Lwin Tuong. Dr. Tint Lwin Tuong has over 38 years of professional experience in forest management and natural resource conservation in Asia and the Pacific. Dr. Tuong was trained as a forester in Myanmar and is currently a senior regional advisor for the Nature Conservancy Asia Pacific program, as well as the country director for TNC Myanmar. So without further ado, I pass the floor to Dr. Tuong.
Thank you. Hello, can you hear me? Okay, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, especially the delegate from the youth communities from ASEAN. Very nice to meet all of you. Of course, I was asked to talk about the role of the community forest, as a traditional nature-based solution for the climate change action, particularly in Myanmar. But before I start this story, definitely I would like to tell a little bit about the limitation of my knowledge and experience from the sort of like a archaeological perspective or sort of like a social perspective. I may have some limited knowledge and experience, but I do have some knowledge in the natural resource management background. So I selected this topic because I want to argue, I want to claim or discuss, this is the challenge of the community forest deployment in the ASEAN region, but that has been very well linked to the traditional farming practices of ethnic communities in Myanmar and also the ASEAN region. So with that, I This picture I share is the view from our community forest in the Inle Lake, and then one of the freshwater lake in the eastern part of Myanmar. So before we start discussing about the role of the CF, I would like to start talking a little about the relationship or interlinkages between the nature, culture, and faith and heritage. That is a very, I think, a similar common things in the many countries in the region, even throughout the world. If you look at the landscape level, you can see the beauty of the nature, and also you can see the combination of the culture, particularly based on the faith-based, especially the religious belief. The country like Myanmar is a very majority of people are Buddhist, so you can see the landscape of Myanmar having a lot of the Buddhist temples, and you can see the very typical village like the pictures in here. You can see the farming, around the village. You will see also the sort of like temples, not far from the farm, and also the just in the village. So this kind of the landscape is very much sort of like evolutionary, I can say. It's developing from time to time. So their culture and their belief and their faith are very much related to the nature as well as to the culture. With that, of course, you can see a number of the World Heritage Site, declared by the UNESCO. Especially in ASEAN, we have over, I think, about 60 World Heritage Sites. Oh no, sorry, about 30, nearly 40 World Heritage Sites. Out of that is they separate culture-oriented and nature-oriented World Heritage Site. So some areas are very much culture-oriented. Angkor Wat and Bagan and Pew, those are very much culture-oriented. Some World Heritage Sites are also a bit of very much nature-oriented heritage site as well. In ASEAN, of course, you can look at the ASEAN Heritage Park very much a bit of combination of nature and culture. For example, like in Myanmar, we do have about 8 ASEAN Heritage Park. Out of that, about 4, 50% of the heritage park are very much related to the religious shrines or temples or cultural practices. So that is very, very, you can see, cannot really separate between the nature and the cultural things. I tried to argue about the community forest because I was myself also practicing the community forest, developing the community forest in the Asia Pacific region. I was the executive director of the RECOVT Community Forestry Training Center based in Universiti for 7 years. So I engaged a lot of the communities in the ASEAN region to promote the community forest. So there are a lot of story behind that community forest, success story as well as the failure stories. So that we still have a lot of challenge to promote the community forest as the collective land management, as a very much traditional based farming practices. If you look at the history of the community forest in Myanmar, you can see that the practice of the current people, what we call the Tang system, is a traditional sort of like a shifting cultivation system. So in the early day, we don't have a very much human population pressure. So those people, they cultivate the forest, and then they grow their crop, and they move to the another place and come back, a few years later. So that rotation was quite short, quite long at the time, because they still can find the land, so that they can come back a little bit later. Only the land got a ready and fertile land to grow the crop. But when we got the British came to the countries in 1824 the first time, and then when they introduced the sort of like a systematic forest management in Myanmar, they found that Tang system can be very good silviculture practice. It means the way we can grow the forest trees using that knowledge of the local people together. So at the beginning, of course, current people, they don't like it, because they said this is a bit of, giving them more regulation and more pressure for them to do that, not to do that. But eventually they found out that this is a very good partnership, the way of the forming villagers, the group coming together, supporting the forest plantation establishment, as well as they got an opportunity to grow their crops in the ground. So to me, I look at the CF not only as an agroforestry practice, but I look at the CF as a sort of like a partnership, benefit sharing the responsibility. This is very much in line with our traditional way of the people living together, especially in the village community levels, and also they are doing the farming together, sharing the benefits together. So that kind of the concept has been gradually modifying a little bit more to talk about their rights, talk about the bundle of rights, particularly the tenures. So whether community should get a little bit better tenure rather than the lands just belong to the government. But this is still the case in many countries in the region. The lands belong to the government. So the community or the indigenous people, of course, they have been there for many years, well before the British came, well before the government, successive government came. They do have the right to assess, and also they do have the right to own. Those are a little bit more sort of like an advanced idea, how the community can be the land ownership, so that they can further manage and also involved in the whole process of addressing the global issues or local issues. What I want to say is we are facing a lot of challenge nowadays. The biggest challenge we are having is two biggest challenges. One is climate change. Another one is biodiversity loss. If you don't have any answer to those issues, you cannot get a sustainable development. Because the climate change is real, nobody can deny it. So many people, policymakers, politicians, business communities, academics, try to sort it out what would be the best way. At the same time, they're trying to develop the many new terminologies. Now they call it nature-based solution. They also call it nature climate solution. Now recently they call it nature positive solution. Whatever you call, it doesn't matter. The fundamental principle is still the same. You still based on the community. You still based on the nature to address those sort of like an issue. You got to start addressing the issue in a local level so that we can really combine those solutions to sort it out the global issues. So that's why what I want to say is when you consider the community forestry, it is always linked to the culture. I always try to argue that it is an intangible cultural heritage because it started in the community, started as a collaboration, started as a benefit sharing, started as the responsibility. So those kind of things are the really encouraging development, but at the same time there are a lot of the challenges and a lot of the obstacle to have the successful CF development in the region. You can look at because a CF can contribute to both climate change mitigation as well as adaptation. Especially when I talk about the mitigation, I will have my next slide, I can explain you a little bit. But for the adaptation, of course, if you have a sort of like climate change, you don't have enough food to produce, you go to the forest. You still can produce non-timber forest products. You call it the foods, you call it the leaves, you call it the fruits. Also, you call it the non-timber forest products like bamboo or rattan. You still have access to the market. At the same time, the dry zone like Myanmar, we use those big trees as the refuge area to prevent from the extreme heat wave. Now, those kind of things are really community forests can really provide as the way for the climate change adaptation. You can see that also in the mangrove areas. Mangrove of Myanmar is a very, very important ecosystem to contribute to the both climate change, adaptation, and mitigation. But we learn a lot of lessons from our experience. Some of you may know this problem we got in 2008. We got a cyclone Nargis. that was I can say the most casual rate, the deadliest cyclone in the world so far. We lost over 130,000 people in 2 days. So with that cyclone Nargis, you can see all the ALD Delta region. Those region really fled out. And a lot of the people died, and many people displaced, millions of people displaced because of this cyclone Nargis. But after the Nargis, people learned a lot about the role of the mangrove forest, because they found out that if you have a mangrove forest, you got more survival. This is a very scientific and very well documented. You can see this picture just here. If you have a more forest here, you got a less casualty. No forest this size, more people die. Very clear for that. So those mangrove forests belong to the government, some belong to the community. So after that very tragic condition, the people have a more, more value. They recognize the value of the mangrove ecosystem, saved life in Myanmar. So from that time, there are a number of the organization, donors, UN agency trying to conserve the mangroves and also restore the mangrove ecosystem in Myanmar. So at the end of the day, what I want to argue is promoting the community forest is promoting the people culture. At the same time, promoting the people power. You can see these pictures. There's a group of the villagers. They gather together to seek the land from the authorities. They want to get a more community managed forest. So they came to ask this gentleman sitting in the middle of the pictures, Director General of the Forest Department. He visited to that area. All the villagers gather him and then ask him to give him more lands to the community's managed area, so that the community can manage the forest, and also they can also produce some of the forest products from those areas. So at the end of the day, when you talk about the community forestry, it means that it is developing a social capital. Social capital in the village level, social capital in the community level. So if you do have a successful engagement with the communities, there can be a lot of the role of the community forest to take care of the climate change mitigation and adaptation. Here is a very important point. Gender equities is really important aspect. Make sure that the women are part of the decision makers. You can see there are many women actively asking this kind of rights. You can see another one is an FPIC, the free, prior, informed consent. This is a very important practice before you engage with the communities to talk about the issues, to talk about the opportunities, and to talk about the what sort of the solution you can find together. Another one is very important, especially for the beneficiary mechanism and taking the share responsibility. Nowadays, people are talking a lot about the carbon market, carbon credit. You want to sell your carbon credit to the companies or developed countries who damage a lot to the ecosystem. They have to pay back by having the carbon credit, paying to the people in the poor countries or developing countries. But at the same time, people in the developing countries need to protect the forest so that the forest can absorb the carbon emission very significantly. But in that mechanism, it is extremely important to be very clear mechanism of benefit sharing. Without having the benefit sharing, your project or whatever you're trying to do, that it will not be successful. Loss and damage fund, that is just came out another ideas or another new terminology in the recent COP27. That is to make a payment to all the damaged ecosystem in the many developing countries or many part of the world. We should get that kind of the financial investment coming from the rich developed country, giving that money to the people in the developing countries so that people can restore the damaged ecosystem, and also to manage the existing ecosystem, at the same time protect, whatever they can protect at the moment. Those are really important. So I will wrap up this my presentation. So I want to say is this argument is a lot of rooms to improve, because I still need to provide a little bit more scientific data and evidences. But the picture I show you about the Nuggets hit area was very striking evidence of the role of the mangrove and the role of the community forest community managed mangrove forest are really important aspect of the saving life, especially when we face with this climate change. At the same time, community forest can be part of the solution for the biodiversity loss. A number of the development challenges, they can play the role, but you need to properly design and manage it. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Tong. Yeah, thank you very much for interesting presentation. And I would like to have a gentle reminder to our audience that please hold on to your questions. Please hold on to your questions until the end of the three presentations. And also, I also would like to invite online participants to put your questions, comments in the Q&A box. And our colleague to bring it over to the panel for discussions. Thank you for the next.
Okay, so thank you, Dr. Tuong, once again. Now I would like to invite our next speaker, Dr. Nurul Salmi Abdul Latip. She is a senior lecturer with the School of Biological Sciences at Universiti Sains Malaysia, Penang, and she works on conservation issues in human-dominated landscapes, focusing on impacts and ecological responses from human ecosystem interactions. So just while we wait for the presentation to load, would just like to remind everyone once again that to keep listening and to keep your questions in mind for the Q&A section later at the end. So now I would like to pass the microphone to Dr. Latip. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for the invitation. I'm very privileged to be here, to be learning so much in just the first day. We've had a lot of discussion the whole day today, and a lot of stuff that's been discussed is very, that's like common trends and common information that we can see runs through the different topics, even though they are of different themes. So I think that's an important message there, that when we talk about natural resource, it doesn't fit into one compartment or one sector. It runs across all discipline, because if we discuss about nature, nature doesn't stand alone. So if you look at where we are right now, even outside, everything is interconnected. So whatever you do, you will affect whatever that it is around you. And even the air that we breathe now would be produced by trees from elsewhere, right? So so that's something important to remember. So my talk will be on resource stewardship in a rapidly changing landscape. We can also see this in a lot of the earlier discussion as well. So basically, I will touch on very briefly on the importance of biodiversity and ecological connectivity. This is the safety net that keeps all of us, humanity, safe, healthy, and thriving on this planet. So biodiversity is actually natural resource. Natural resource is biodiversity, it's nature, and is in essence the foundation of traditional knowledge. So what we see, actually the traditional knowledge that we've been talking about is ways or methods or approaches of using natural resources sustainably. So over time, when we pay less attention to traditional knowledge, we become less sustainable, right? Or unsustainable in our actions. So this is when environmental problems starts to emerge. And now we see that it's become a crisis. It's no longer an environmental problem, it's become an environmental crisis. Climate is no longer just a problem, it's become a climate crisis right now, climate emergency in fact. So, but can we, number 4, changing the narratives? Can we see the problems that we have now differently? Can we look at the conventional ways that we've been practicing? Can we look at it from a different angle? And lastly, I will give some suggestion. I don't know if I have time even. I mean, there's so much to share, and also I can see all the earlier speakers, there's so much to share, but we have so little time. So anyway, I'm going to continue. So maybe just a quick one, because I just wanted to show you. Just now we had a speaker from Sarawak, so he was discussing on the problems here in Sarawak. But I'll be focusing more on Peninsula Malaysia, because that's where I'm more familiar with, and I do a lot of work here. So if you can see the map here, the middle here is the central forest spine, which is where we have our last stronghold of rainforest in Malaysia. And this area is being plundered quite mercilessly. But we still have a lot of large tracts of forest, but this is the last bastion. So this is very worrying, the trend that we are going right now. Okay, so if you look at biodiversity, so in Malaysia is a tropical country with very high diversity, blessed with all kinds of terrains and landscapes. We have mangroves, we have all kinds of ecosystem, we have peatland, and not just on the terrestrial, but also underwater. We are part of the Coral Triangle Initiative, as was mentioned earlier, was one of the speakers. So Malaysia is really strategically located in the sense that we are very rich on land, as well as very rich in the water, underwater, for all the coral reef richness and the species, marine species, and so on. And all of these natural resources, they perform very important critical ecological function and ecosystem services. So what are ecosystem services? These are made up of 4 services, main services. We call it the provisioning services. We have the cultural services, and then we also have the regulating services and supporting services. So these are all the main services. You can try and Google and see what they are, because I cannot elaborate, I don't have time. So these are the free services that ecosystems provide for us. And this is the basis to traditional knowledge, how indigenous people they are very wise at using all these free services. And they use nature's technology in these activities. That's why it's very sustainable. They're not working against nature like what we are doing conventionally. They are working with nature, harmonizing all the actions and extraction of natural resources using nature's ways and technology, right? So we saw just now with the youth group, with the design of the house, the old Malay house, using wind system to cool the house. So this is what we mean by harmonizing with the environment with our designs. Okay, so I don't know if I have time for this. I just wanted to show you the interconnectedness of nature. So if you look at this diagram here, when we look at nature, we don't look at just one spot of where you are. You need to look at it at a macrocosm level, like what Dr. Sati was sharing earlier, looking at ecosystem always at a macrocosm level, because it's going to affect everything else, especially if you deforest an area at a large scale. So everything is interconnected. If you deforest hills upstream, it's going to affect the river and eventually end up in the sea. That's going to affect not just the people downstream here getting flooding, but it's going to affect the seagrasses, the reefs, and also the fish resources along the coastal areas. So basically, the interconnectedness and interdependence of ecosystem reflects the complexity and very balanced. If you look at nature, natural landscapes, it's very balanced. That's why there's no problem. And with traditional knowledge, they are utilizing that balanced system and keeping it balanced, not to tip it to one side too much, but always, so that the balance is always there. That is why there is no problem. Like for what we are doing now with modern activities, we are extracting too much, tipping the balance too much, that because nature, how it works is that it always will keep itself in equilibrium, right? So if you tip it this a little bit, it will do, if it's minor, then it can tip it and it become okay again. But if you tip it too much, it cannot handle the situation anymore. It will react with mudslides, landslides, flooding, to tip it back, to try to tip it back to equilibrium. So that's what's happening really in nature, right? So it's quite extraordinary if you look at it in that way. So basically, if I'm not going to reiterate all the traditional knowledge that we know indigenous communities practices, because we know that it's very, very sustainable in a very sustainable. So they have a very, because for indigenous communities, they have been living or interacting with their landscape for so long, they have a very holistic understanding of creation and the existence and how that is manifested in their relationship with the environment. Okay, so that is, they have a worldview of like systemic worldview of the of nature. So that's what we mean by macrocosm. You need to have a systemic worldview of the environment. You cannot compartmentalize it. It is a multidisciplinary topic. So if I'm tackling a pollution problem, I cannot just be looking at the pollution. I need to get people from the social, orang asli, social study as well. You need to bring in the geologists, you need to bring in the biologists, you need to bring in, you need to bring in people from different disciplines. Because if not, you won't be able to solve the pollution problem, right? Okay, so basically for indigenous communities, they see themselves as custodian, responsible in protecting welfare of all lives in the forest. This is because they see themselves as the forest. For example, like the group that like me and some colleagues, we are looking at, I'm also affiliated with an NGO called Persatuan Aktivis Sahabat Alam. So we engage ourselves with a group of indigenous communities in the central forest spine called the Temia. So, just now Shak Koyo was sharing about the group for Temia group. It's very unique of how they see themselves as part of nature, as part of the forest. So they don't see themselves as higher or superior than nature, but they are part of the forest. So that is how they have this deep understanding of the ecology, of how to practice their daily activities with deep respect, and also be able to preserve biodiversity and ecological connectivity at the same time. Okay, for example, they have what they call a community calendar, and this community calendar is called Tahut. So what they do is that, this is not their community calendar, this is just an example of a community or calendar using, if you do like a documentation of the different months, but this is the Gregorian months. But for the Temia people, what they have is the calendar is a calendar that it's not the ordinary 12-month calendar, but they use seasons and time of the year. Like for example, they look at the flowering season and also the fruiting season as the beginning of the year. And then that goes on to the next phase of time and so on. And eventually it will end with the dry season. The dry season is like the end of the year. So each beginning and end of the year, they will have some celebrations to welcome that part of the year. And this calendar is being used to carry out their activities, whether it's hunting or it's farming, making use of resources available at that particular period. For example, during fruiting season, they collect fruits, but at the same time they'll carry out hunting because there's a lot of animals going out, with forest trees fruiting, for example. So they are making use of what resources available during that time. Okay. I'm not going to go into this. This is just a quick description of the what I mentioned just now. And also they practice farming, also shifting cultivation. A lot of people have negative perception of shifting cultivation, but actually shifting cultivation is regenerative agriculture, if you look at it, because they would have very specific sites for their farming plots. They do not open new areas. And once they're done with one area, when there's less fertility, they move on to another spot, and then they will leave that original spot for rest for 20 to 30 years. So by that time, the land would have regenerated and already, you know, a small forest would have started by then. So then they would come back to the original spot and do farming again and not open new areas. So it's very sustainable in that way. And they don't open a large area. Depending on the size of the community, they will only open what is needed to supply them for that particular year. Right? So it is not as... If you look at modern agriculture, total deforestation, bare grounds, totally. In Malaysia, we call it cuci mangkok. Cuci mangkok means like you clear your plate, you know. So cuci mangkok kind of deforestation, which just destroy everything in just a short period. But total biodiversity loss and so on. So it's very, very extremely different from how indigenous people manage their own the land management system. All right, so let's look at why this happened. Okay, so for Malaysia, since we have had independence, we've had the problem has increased over the years, right? And lately, in the last 20 years, deforestation has happened at such large scales. So much so that the cumulative area that can open in one area can be about 10,000 acres, right? From 3,000 acres to 10,000 acres. That's a huge area. So if you look at the ecology and the biology of forest ecosystem with that kind of size, of course it's going to change the weather patterns, right? It's going to affect the water cycle, it's going to affect evapotranspiration, it's going to affect a lot of these biological and ecological processes of the forest, which is going eventually to affect the weather system. And if you do this long term, opening more and more areas, it's going to contribute to climate change, right? So the issue here is the problem, the root cause is deforestation in Malaysia. I'm not sure about other countries, but in Malaysia it's deforestation, which is more of a problem to indigenous people than climate change at the moment. It's more critical, right? So we have other, why do deforestation happens for forest plantation? Like now, in the last few years, the trend is opening up Musang King durian plantation. This is a trend because there's such a good price for Musang King durian export to China that everyone is, you know, clambering to get on the bandwagon. Quarrying, mining, construction, and so on. So there's a lot of reasons. Dam construction especially. So these are some of the photos that we took at the Temia villages. So the area that we engaged with, there are 16 villages, Temia, and each one of them have the same issue of deforestation. So imagine 16 villages and all of them have the same problem. So this is a very serious, very critical problem in Malaysia. And this is right smack in the central forest pine. Okay, so I mentioned, and also because of the forest loss or habitat loss, a lot of these villages are also experiencing human-wildlife conflict. You get tigers and sun bears and elephants coming into their villages, coming into their farms, into their plantation, and always the wildlife will be at the losing end, okay? Because when they report this to the authorities, what do the authorities do? Capture the wild animals, or if they attack, sometimes it ends in injury, so the authorities might have to put down the animal. And these animals, tigers, elephants, sun bears, these are all endangered species. If you look at the IUCN conservation status, our tiger, we have only about 200 individuals left in the whole of Malaysia, right? And if you look at elephants, it's on the endangered species list. Sun bear, vulnerable species list. So this is very, very, very problematic. It's very conflicting and it's very heartbreaking. Yeah, so the essence of it is, without forest, culture and traditions and customs of indigenous people, it's lost. Because everything that they believe in, the culture and the tradition and everything that they practice all this while is to do with the forest, depend on the forest. It's like total dependence on the forest. It's not just them, but us as well, but we don't realize it because we are not close to the forest. Whereas indigenous people, they are close to the forest. They feel like Shak, just now you could see how passionate he was, describing what he does. So it's that kind of passion, which you cannot find it in city dwellers like us. So a lot of the indigenous people in Malaysia, not only in Peninsula, but also in Sabah and Sarawak, having the same problem as well. They are left without means of adapting to these rapid extreme changes. So if we talk about climate change, they cannot even manage with deforestation. What more with climate change? And climate change is the result of deforestation. So the more important thing now is protecting forests, right? So the consequences of deforestation is multi-pronged. There's a lot of impacts on people, biodiversity, physical landscape. If you make a list, it's not never going to end. So many. And what we do during COVID, because some of the villages had problems with human-wildlife conflict, so we actually got permission to go help build some farms in one or two of the villages because they had problems to go out and get supplies. And why did we help the orang asli to do farms? Because they don't have forests anymore. They don't have forests to go look for food. Their supermarket has disappeared. Their pharmacy has disappeared. So you have to help them, give them external support. And we carry out trainings for farming and so on. They've been very engaging. So in Malaysia, the thing is, the main cause of traditional knowledge decline would be not climate change at the moment, right? It's more to do with habitat and ecosystem loss, especially through massive and extremely large-scale deforestation. So basically, at the end of the day, all the wealth of the forest, all the wealth of the wealth and wisdom of the indigenous community that has passed down over generations will also be permanently lost, right? And what is very serious is that not all of them have been documented. Yeah, so this is very sad. I think this is the same problem everywhere, not just in Malaysia. So from our engagement with the 16 villages, we could categorize the villages into these 4 types. Extremely affected, that means they have complete forest loss, which means they would have migrated or been displaced or sent into like a penempatan baru, like new residential area for orang asli. Secondly, seriously affected with major loss, more than 50%. Affected, which means partial loss, about 50% or up to 50% but in the transition of going into serious or extreme state of forest loss. This is all due to forest deforestation. Or they are still intact, not affected yet, but the bulldozers and lorries are on their way. So they are going to get there eventually. There's 1 or 2 villages that still protecting their forests for 1.5 years already, putting up human blockades. Yeah, so this is what the scenario is in Malaysia at the moment. So this is just an example. I think Sharks showed some images, shared some images as well. So what we do is we conducted training for the orang asli to make their own boundaries, to map their own boundaries. So we carry out training to raise awareness for them about environmental issues, that how do they become the eyes and the ears so that they can report, and to tell them, also inform them what is the right channels, what are the right channels for you to go to report and so on. And they have also made on their own initiative to bring in lawyers from the Bar Council to teach them about their rights, customary rights, traditional land rights, and all the things. Yeah, so, finish? Oh, okay. So a lot of things. So what we can see with the indigenous communities is that they have become guardians, but in a very different way now. They are not just the original custodians because they don't have forests anymore, or they are fighting for their forests, so they become, they have undergone a steep learning curve, right? So just a little bit more, if you don't mind, just finish off with the photos. So we've also teach them using GPS. If you know what GPS is, you know, like when you go driving, you have GPS to map out their boundaries, and also drones to carry out their own forest monitoring. So you have to empower them to let them do the work, yeah, because they are there all the time. So just some examples. Yeah, but I won't be able to finish everything. Yeah. So maybe I'll just end here. Okay. Maybe we can discuss whatever is else left afterwards. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you, Dr. Latip, for the very insightful presentation. Yes. So we'll definitely have some more time to discuss and for you to elaborate at the end at the Q&A session. So to save some time, I'd like to introduce our next speaker, which is Dr. Suwichan Phatthanaphraiwan. He was born in the mountains of Chiang Mai and is a renowned Karen songwriter, musician, singer, poet, activist, and professor. He is the co-founder of Asian Ethnic Creative Foundation and serves as the Vice President of the Foundation for Culture and Environment of the Southeast Asian chapter. So, will you have a presentation?
Yeah.
Okay. So.
Okay, Doreen, we're waiting for the presentation. First of all, I would like to thank Siam Society and SEACHA that invited me to join and to participate in this conference. I knew that if compared to my capacity, I couldn't qualify to this conference, but so I really appreciate about it. Actually, before I perform or I lecture or I give the speech somewhere, I usually introduce myself as a she. She is a current name, so it means the little boys. So, but my father cannot register my name in Thai officer as a she because they said that it have no meaning in Thai language. So I have to create my new name. Not I have to. My father have to create my new name as a Suwichan Phatthanaphraiwan. If you ask my grandmother, my grandfather, my grandparents, they don't understand this kind of meaning at all. So please call me Chi. No, I am Chi. So I would like to share about the current environmental stewardship of natural resource. You might heard about current a little bit from the first speaker from Myanmar. So I will explain more who are current later on. So this is one of our community in the midst of forest. We have waterfall here. We have our watershed here. We have our community here. We have our rice field here. I would like to start from the forestry discourse in Thailand. We have a lot of discourse of forestry to the indigenous people in Thailand, but at least the main discourse, the three main discourse, the first one, we got the image from the forestry or in the Thai society. It doesn't mean Siam society, but Thai society. No. Society that we are indigenous people in Thailand who be like a destroyer or deforestator. No, so this is the first discourse. No. So we are risk for natural resource. We are risk for forest. The second discourse, the image or the stereotype of the Thai society or the forestry department, they said that the indigenous people in Thailand will be as a drug dealer or drug maker. So don't let the indigenous people have time, have space to use the land in the forest. Otherwise, they're going to plant the drug plant as an opium or something like that. This is the second discourse. And then the third discourse is they also have the generalized point of views of the Thai society. It's not always only Thai society. Some like historical, mainstream historical, they also point that the indigenous people in Thailand is like a immigrant people. For example, like our current people, they said that all of current people in Thailand is migrant from Myanmar. But in the reality, I will point in the next. So because of three discourse, so they don't trust the indigenous people to living in the forest area. So they said that if let them free in the forest area, is the forest will gone, natural resource will gone, the river will gone, the wildlife will gone. This is the forestry discourse in Thailand to the indigenous people. So I know that Thai, we might have our brother and sister Thai citizen here. So if you would like to defend with me, I'm ready to defend about this. No? So where the current people located in Thailand? If you see this map, in the north part, in the yellow part, we have whole country. We have like 15 provinces of current people located, including in the north, in the west, and in the central part. So we have official population like more than 500,000 people. More than 125 households, more than 1,000, almost 2,000 villages, and then more than 5,000 sub-village. Because in Thai, they have structure of the village, they call like a muti. Muti is mean village, but one muti have yomban. Yomban is mean sub-villages. Some village, they have more than 5 villages. So in current community in Thailand, like an official document, no, we have like 1,993 villages and then more than 5,000 sub-villages. In Thailand, at least we have two ministers that deny or refuse that no indigenous people in Thailand. The first minister is the former interior minister. No, his name Surapong Tovichak Chayakun. So he said that no indigenous people in Thailand. We have only ethnic people in Thailand because they still believe that the indigenous people have no indigenous people in Thailand. The ethnic is an immigrant. This is the first minister. The second minister is the current forestry minister, His in the current one, his name Warawut Silapa Achana. He said that no indigenous people in Thailand. So when he proposed the Kengkrachan National Park as a World Heritage. So the UNESCO warning that you have to Thailand have to aware about indigenous rights who located inside the national park. But he said that no indigenous people in Thailand. So you don't need to aware about that kind of rights of people. So at least 2 ministers that said that or refuse or deny that no indigenous people in Thailand. But it doesn't mean I'm point. But the first one, we have the missionary from France. He mentioned that the current he mentioned the current story in the Ayutthaya age, Ayutthaya kingdom age, And then the second one is like a Thai academic, They also talk about current people located in the Suvarnabhumi area or Southeast Asia area more than 700 years ago. So this is one that I would like to point that if the people, the groups located in some area more than 700 years, we can accept them as indigenous people or not. This is the point. But for me, this is the history of indigenous people in this land. Another point I would like to point up, I would like to highlight about the green zone of Thailand. If we're looking at the map, this source is from the Forest Management Bureau, Department of Forestry. In the 1963, you can see the green zone of Thailand. But 51 years later, on 2014, the green zone of Thailand is changed. It's decreased 21%. And if we calculate in the area, it's a decrease more than 12 million hectares. So, but when you consider about the green zone that's still maintained, and then you can consider about this map. 50% of the green zone that's still maintained in Thailand is belong to Karen community area in the north and in the west part. So that's why today I would like to talk about the current stewardship in the natural resource. So why the green zone still be in the current community? Why I would like to highlight that the current people, they be one of stewardship in this country. So the first point I would like to share about the customary protected area in current community. I don't want to share, but I not share about the knowledge base. This one, I share about wisdom base to you. So the first activities for the current community when the baby born, we have some ceremony we call like Depotu. Depotu. Depotu is mean umbilical cord tree, umbilical cord trees. So when the baby born, father or grandfather have to cut the umbilical cord of the child and then put in the bamboo, and then go to the forest and select one trees that are strong and then big, and then tight the umbilical cord box in the tree. And we believe that the trees and then the boys, the soul is connected to each other. You cannot cut that tree anymore. So one person for one trees. If in the community they have like a 300 person, they should have 300 trees. So we not only have only 3, but we keep that area as a forest. We call like a Depotu forest. So that is mean we have bond forest. But for me, this is I call like a bond register forest. So when we born, we believe that we have to register with the nature. In the previous, we don't have government. We not belong to any government, but we belong to nature. Nature is as our government. So we have to register our life, our soul, our spirit with the nature. So the tree connect us to the nature. So this is the first forest or the first customary protected areas. So actually the Depotu area is the average is around 10 to 12 hectare. So if we minor with the 5,719 sub-village, we're gonna have like a 69, almost 70 hectare in the whole country of the Depotu areas. The second one we call it Taswako. Swa is mean 0 or empty. So Taswako is mean empty place or 0 place. You know, when the people pass away, we are not burned as a Buddhist. We are not have like a cemetery, like a very clear area as a Christian, but we have we call like a Taswako, no? As a funeral forest. So we bury the people in the ground, and then we plant something more. If the people who pass away like to eat mango, we plant mango for she or him. If they like some flower, we plant a flower for them or something. So we try to increase the diversity in that forest. So that forest, the people who are still alive cannot use the resource over there. Even wildlife, fruit, wood, soil, anything we cannot use. Only able to use for the people who pass away. No. So it's also for this area is the average around 10 to 12 hectare. So if we minor, I think the area almost the same with the Depotu area. So the last area we call like a Tikwaki. Tikwaki, if I direct translate meaning to English, is mean like the roots of water area or the trees of sea area. So actually it'd be like a watershed forest or watershed area. So this one is the biggest area in the community. For example, if I show you about the first photo, this area is like a Tikwaki. So we want plant, or we want do a field over here. So it's like a protected area or forbidden area for agriculture. So we call Tikwaki. So Tikwaki, the average of Tikwaki around 800 to 8,000 acres. So that is mean the average is 4,400 acres. So if we plus with the main village, so we're gonna have like 8,007,069 hectares. No? If you compare to the biggest national park of Thailand is Kaeng Krachan National Park in the Phetburi. No? The total area of the Kaeng Krachan is 728 hectares. So you can see only customarily protected area in current community is bigger than the biggest national park of Thailand, more than 10 times. No, this is therefore the customary protected areas in current community forests are strictly control conservation area, as well as refuge for animal and plant species. No. And another point that I would like to highlight is I call it like a 3S taboo and regulation of current hunting. So the first S is a space taboo. Space taboo is considered to the space taboo. They have like a twice space taboo. The first space is related to the stream or the water. So if in the downstream area, we cannot eat some animal there. For example, like a frog, like some fish, because we believe that that kind of animal is being the pest of the god of water. If we eat it, it makes the god of water angry, and then the god of water we go away. If it go away, it's not give the water to us anymore. The river gonna dry. But if that kind of dose of animal is located in the midstream or the upstream, we can eat it. So this is we call it a species taboos. But another space is according to the village. So if some of wildlife is come back to the village, we won't eat, we won't kill. For example, like a little deer, turtle, is come to the village, we won't eat it. Even surround the village, we also won't eat until we use like the chicken sound. If it's far until we cannot hear the chicken sound from the village, we can eat it. But if we still hear the chicken sound in the village, we won't eat it. But if located in the forest, we eat it. So this, the first S is the space. No? The second one is related to the seasonal. The seasonal, for example, like some fish, some season we can eat, some season it's be like a forbidden to eat it. No, like another example I would like to give as a squirrel. Squirrel we can eat in the squirrel in the raining season, in the summer season we can eat it. It's like a green, but in the winter season we cannot eat. In the raining season, maybe if we have nothing to eat, we can eat it. No, something like that. No. No. So another S is a specific species. Specific species we have for the species we have more than 37 types that be like the forbidden, and for the seasonal we have 17 types, and for the specific we have more than we have 21 types. For example, like a hornbill, elephant, or gibbon. So we believe that the elephant is the spirit of rice. If we kill the elephant, we cannot plant rice. We cannot plant rice well. The hornbill is the spirit of love. If we kill the hornbill, we won't get married, something like that. Or if we get married, we're gonna divorce or something like that. This is a belief. So these 3S, taboo and regulation of the current hunting, is, I think, this is the steward characteristic. No? Thank you for Bill. No? The last point, no, I would like to talk about the current relationship with the spirit guardian of the land. No? So we have, in Thai, we said that we have 3 core. The first one is we ask, 3 core is mean asking. No? The first one, we asking for permission to the temporary use of the land. Before we use the water, the land, the forest, we have to ask for it, because we believe that the human being not be the owner of nature, but the spirit, they have their own nature, like a super spirit. We have to ask. Without ask, that is when we stolen from the spirit. No? After we ask, when we use, they might get hurt or something. We have to asking for forgiveness. No? And then in the last one, we have to asking for thanksgiving, or we have to asking for celebrate. We are not celebrate only among the human, but we celebrate with the nature. We celebrate with the super spirit. No? So this is our the relationship with the spiritual guardian of the land. So this is my conclusion. I would like to say that the characteristic of the current stewardship in the natural resource, at least 5 characteristics. The first one, the current people be the consumer who is conscious of the vulnerable or the vulnerability of the natural resource. The second one, to be the protector, aesthetic. Why I say that's aesthetic? Every step of the asking, we include the whiskey. We enjoy with human and human nature and human super nature. I think the super nature also will get drunk with this kind of ceremony. So this is an aesthetic characteristic of the natural resource conservationist. The third one is to be the creator of philosophical wisdom of conservation. That I told you, I'm not share about the knowledge base, but this is I share about the wisdom base. No? So the current people, they be the creator of the philosophical of the wisdom for conservation. And then the fourth one is the worldwide of non-human center control. No? And then the last one, to be a green culture, organic, economic, and a way of production in the circular economic. As you mentioned about the shifting cultivation, but actually we don't say that shifting cultivation, we call like a rotational farming, no, rotation farming, no, something like that. So because of time, I will skip this one. So I would like to end with the current proverb or Pokemon proverb. No? We have the proverb that how to cut the tree without let it die, how to eat the fish without broke its bone, how to eat crab without broke its claw. No? And finally, I would like to share about the current wise man in Thailand. He talked about because of we eat from the forest, we have to take care of them. Because of we take care of them, so we have enough for it in our life. So this is the characteristic of the stewardship in the natural resource. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Chi, if I may. Ladies and gentlemen, we have listened to 3 presentations, really fascinating, and I find it's really engaging from Dr. Chi, if I may, from who presented the case of the current environmental stewardship, Dr. Tint Lwin Tang about the traditional nature-based solutions, NBS, from Myanmar, and Dr. Nurul Abdul Latip with traditional natural resources stewardship. These are really, really interesting cases and also the models I would like, if I may, for to track the ownership and the stewardship of the local communities over their natural resource. If I would like to summarize what we have listened to the speakers, and then so we can come up with questions. We have seen that over centuries, created and defined in their customary rights, the local communities across the regions have accumulated a tremendous body of knowledge and nature and environment, and perform a variety of traditional practices and cultural expressions, and in sustainably using and managing natural resources and sustaining a livelihood. So the presentation also showed the intrinsic interconnection and interdependence between the human and the natural environments, such as soil, water sources, forest, marine ecosystems, and so on. And in many cases, the human and nature are one. Unfortunately, local knowledge and traditional practices, such as those presented in the cases, have been overlooked and underestimated. In some cases, the barriers of such knowledge, the local communities, especially those livelihood is dependent on nature, were displaced, brought out of the picture, such as in the case of protected forests or national parks or even bioreserves. In the worst case, they were even labeled as nature destroyers. The presentation also pinpointed the risks and threats and the consequences brought about from the environmental changes caused by deforestation, pollution, and barriers, especially barriers caused by policies on land management and even nature conservation. The cases and presentations that show that hope and opportunities that pose the questions of what and how, when the importance of traditional knowledge and stewardship of natural resources by the local communities across the region or across the globe be fully understood, recognized, integrated into government policies in the struggle to tackle climate change and environmental changes to a level beyond the local community. So there are plenty of keywords that the three speakers have brought to us today on the floor. First is the traditional stewardship, indigenous rights, partnership, trust, free, fair, and informed consent. And I would like to add that sustain is a new term that UNESCO has brought in under the Convention of UNESCO. Trust, yeah, and benefit sharing and responsibility sharing. So that's what we have learned from the speakers in my perspective. And I would like to encourage the audience and also online and here in the meeting hall to bring the questions and comments to interact with our speakers today. And we'd like to have my colleague to facilitate the discussion.
Okay. Okay, thank you. So while the participants, the audience is gathering your thoughts, maybe thinking of what questions to ask, I have a few questions on the behalf of the moderators to ask our panelists here today. So the first question that I would like to ask, I'd like to direct to Dr. Tuong. Given your discussions on like community forests and the challenges of how some might fail while others prosper, could you give some recommendations on how to like strengthen this partnership, not only with villagers and foresters, but also with the private sector or the public sector and the government?
Thank you for this very important questions. The development of the community forest has been facing many challenges, not only in this ASEAN region, it's globally, because the role of the private sector is not very well integrated in this development. It's very important aspect. And because the community, they need to face the competition of the market, right? When you develop the community forestry, there can be a number of objectives. You know, some community forests set up for the biodiversity conservation, some set up for the fuel wood supply, some set up for the watershed protection. Now the expectation of the global communities on the community forest is very high. Now even they are now expecting the community forest to contribute to the climate change mitigation and adaptation. Is a huge agenda. So to be able to do that, there must be the very strong understanding about the knowledge, the skills, and also the sort of like how they can be a part of the solution rather than problem. Like you mentioned about the discourse in Thailand is always pointed out as a problem rather than solution. So we must change that dimension. The public sector as well as the private communities, they need to have a sort of like a stewardship together. That is really important aspect. There are a lot of ways that we can develop that kind of the collaboration. Of course, the carbon market is one of the opportunities. The private sector really want to collaborate with the communities because globally, community managed forests or community managed protected areas are much better than the public managed, the government or the department managed, protected area. That's been very clear about that. So just now, my colleagues from the current group, he mentioned a lot about the how much forest they managed, about how many times, 10 times or 100 times, much bigger than the whole, the Thailand area. So that is a really huge opportunity for the private to understand about their opportunity, to collaborate with this kind of the grassroots level or indigenous people. Thank you.
So I completely agree with that. I think that there are definitely a lot of opportunities, maybe to make them see like some incentive, but then like you also said, there are some new words that these public sectors or the private sectors are coming up with, like climate adaptation, loss and damage, and nature-based solutions that you mentioned in your work. I'd like to follow up on that. Maybe as a forester, I'm curious to ask your opinion on what do you think of all of these new terms? Is it repackaging stuff that we already know, the cultural traditions? Is it taking advantage of it, or is it like necessary?
Personally, I don't like this new terminology very much because sometimes I confuse a lot. So, sometimes they said nature-based solutions, sometimes they said nature-climate solution, sometimes they now telling the nature positive. With those are you got to be a little bit careful. But I don't know who created that one, but I don't really object those kind of development. But the fundamental thing is that you need to respect the traditional knowledge and traditional ways of managing our natural resources. It will never go away. Those kind of things, kind of traditional knowledge and skill within the framework or whatever terminology you develop. It doesn't really matter. The most important thing is the respect. My colleague mentioned about the respect. Respect each other, understand each other, and how you can collaborate each other. This is the most important things. Because the world we are living is not standalone anymore. Nobody is a really superpower anymore. Nobody escaped from the COVID. Nobody escaped from this nuclear threat. The world we are living is just a small village. So in that sense, you got to find out how you can collaborate and how you can find the friends and how you can really share your benefits. You cannot be rich by yourself. Oh, I'm rich. I don't care about my neighbor. Your neighbors are still poor. They will be the problem for you, even you are rich. So that benefit sharing, this is an equity issue, is really important dimension we all need to, consider together.
Thank you for that very interesting perspective. I particularly like the point about respect. And I think it also kind of relates to Dr. Latip's point on the systemic worldview that a lot of these indigenous people or cultural wisdom that we have really connects to. I'd like to ask you of how do you think maybe we can spread this systemic worldview on how we have this relationship with nature, how we can live with nature to society and people living their everyday lives.
Okay, thanks. Thank you for the question. There's several ways. One way is to mainstream the issue of deforestation to the public. We need to find ways of how we can bring, because for indigenous community facing problems with deforestation, they need a lot of support from the general public and other stakeholders. So helping them to bring issues of deforestation or their plight to the mainstream public is very important. And then secondly is perhaps integrating indigenous knowledge into schools, whether it be informal or formal. So we can start with informal first, for example. And some countries have even done it, like Canada, Australia, India, they have done that, integrating that into teachers training, education, because they have indigenous groups. So it helped, teachers with the training to teach the indigenous children as well as other children. So we can also do that to integrate into the school curriculum. So just a couple of suggestions.
Thank you for your suggestions. And I'd like to continue to Dr. Shi. I'd actually like to ask you, following from that question of how we can spread this knowledge, maybe do you think there's an opportunity or a possibility of like the customary protected areas to be implemented beyond Karen communities, perhaps on a national level in policies and things like that?
Thank you for the question. Yes, I do agree that we should, extend those kind of knowledge to another area. But today I give example for the current people, but we also have another indigenous group who also have the customary like this, such as Hmong people or Lisu people as well. So for me, if we would like to extend this kind of practical to in the national level or in the policy level, I think we should change our mindset to we should set up a new mindset, at least to R and P, two R and two P. R, the first one, I think we should meaning or reasoning of the meaning to the local meaning or the how to say it, the wisdom meaning to knowledge meaning. No, because in the new generation, when we talk about belief, because we believe like this, we practice like this, they don't want to practice our belief. But if we explain or we give the reason in the scientist ways, they're gonna understand the reason why. So they're gonna practice about it. This is the first thing. The second R is I would like to mention about rights. So we have to think about right to access, to use the natural resource to equal. And then we have to provide the right to access, protection, natural resource to equal. Somehow the state let us to protect or to conserve the forest without right to use, only protect. So it makes the people or the villager don't see any benefit for concern the natural resource. If they see the benefit of the concern, 100% they will concern. Because of the use, they have to concern. And somehow, we would like to protect our area, but the state not allow us to protect. For example, now in the border of Thailand, Myanmar, we have some company that are cooperate with two countries. I don't want to say which country, you know already. They would like to build the big dams, the Lwin River. Because Lwin the biggest river that still flow like freely in nowadays. But now they have actually they have more than 13 dam projects in these rivers. So the villager beside both of the area would like to protest and protect the dam. But the state try to don't allow the people to protect. So we don't have right even protect the natural resource in our community. You see, if they would like to use this, they use without ask the permission to the local people. So linked to two P's now. The first P, I think the partnership is important. When we talk about forest, we talk about natural resource. Actually, we have to change our news paradigm. The forest or the natural resource, it belong to whom? Belong to a state, belong to government, or belong to the people, or belong to the local people. So I think we have to change our idea to the partnership. So belong to everyone. No? So we have to do like a co-management. We cannot let the forestry officer to protect the forest alone. Of course, nowadays we cannot let the villager to protect alone as well. So we have to be like that. The forest is belong to the people, not belong to only the state. No? Another P is in the policy level. So I think for example, in Thailand, when they declare or they produce some policy, we call like a one size for all, one policy in the whole country. So, but you have to think that even though the landscape or the culture of the people is a difference, no? But sometimes if you use one policy for all, it's not fair for some culture who already be stewardship already. But for example, in the green zone that I show in the point, when the government see the green zone, we have to keep this kind of green zone, and then they declare as a national park and cover the village inside the green zone. So it's not fair for the people who living for 700 years or 500 years ago. So you become too illegal immediately after they declare as the national park or something like that. So 2P, partnership, and then the policy level we have to think, and then 2R is meaning or rights. No? Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. G. Yes, now I would like to open the floor for our discussion from, please. Mr. in the back, please.
Hello, thank you for the insightful discussion. One of our major problems back in the Philippines is the lack of a coherent national land use policy that covers indigenous persons and indigenous territory. What's your take on providing indigenous peoples with indigenous land titles covering their territory? Because for us, it's a contentious issue, especially when politicians use this lack of a title as a way of encroaching and grabbing the land and continuously receding the property of the indigenous peoples. So I think I triggered some nerves, so it should be a good conversation. Thank you.
Now, over to you. Over to the speakers. Who would like to go first?
I would like to take advance to answer this question. According to land title, in Thailand, we also faced with this kind of a situation, and then we on the period of the negotiate periods, because especially in the forest area, in the green zone area, the government they would like to give, they call like a land document, but not land title. It's different. The land document is mean they allow you to use this land. You have to rent it. You have to pay each year. But for us, we said that we have to rent our ancestor land. It's a look not make sense. No, this is the one that we not accept the policy of state. Now we try to negotiate. The second one, when they would like to give the land title or land document, they would like to give as a individual document or individual land title. But in our customary law, in our culture, one land is not belong to only one person, but it belong to community. Everyone be the owner of this land. We call like a collective land. So we would like to have like a collective land title, not individual land title. But the government not agreed with the collective land title. Yes, in Thai we call it a chanot chumchon or community land title. One community, one land title. It's not one family or on one person, something like that. So this is we still on the negotiate period with this. Even though they would like to give us, but they give as one they thought. They don't give. It depends on our customary law, something like that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Shi, for that. Any other questions, or would you like to add?
I just want to add up you asking about the policy component. It is really important, but policy for whom? Who develop the policy? How you develop the policy? It's really important. Sometimes the policy can be developed, just for the one government, and then implementation can be a little bit different way. So the process of the policy development need to be very participatory, need to be very understanding about some of the issues in the ground. So that policy will be very strong policy and then successful policy to implement. The world we are facing, we are living now, there are so many failed policies. And because the process of policy is not participatory as well. It's very much top-down sometimes rather than bottom-up. So that must be the way. That's why we are, the organization I used to work before, promote a lot of the policy-making process to be a participatory. And then we developed a lot of the intergovernmental mechanism through the ASEAN or through the APEC mechanism. Those kind of things are, it's still a long way to go, but definitely that I really appreciate that point is really important. Thank you.
I'd like to add a little bit. This is our experience in Central Peninsula. It's not going towards policy, but what we did, these are grassroots movement, on the ground. And what the community has done, because the Tamia group, they are quite proactive, but this is after 15 years of fighting, of struggles. So they've become stronger now. And they came about on their own initiatives in the beginning. So what they did was they educated themselves. They went around looking for experts to come and help them and train them in rights, legal rights, customary land rights and all that. And like for us, we've just recently come and help them with more technological stuff like GPS, drones and stuff like that. So from engaging with the Bar Council, with lawyers, they found out that they can actually take logging companies to court, right? So what they do, but they need to have very meticulously documented documents, yeah, systematically. So what we did was we trained them to make this documentation, but at the same time they also had training before. We simply came in later to help them with the mapping and forest monitoring and all that. So the documentation that they have to carry out is very meticulous. They need to be able to prove that they have been taking care of the area for such and such time. This is their area, things like that. So one of the requirement was to provide evidence for their boundaries. So that's where the GPS mapping comes in. That really helped with the documentation. So they are able to, so now actually we have all the boundaries for all the communities already, and their areas are very wide, you know, but that depends very much on the size of the community. Like Dr. Chi said just now, it's a community area, not like a family. So the whole, it's like the foraging ground of, you know, the traditional lands like foraging ground for them. So they would have a community A would have one area here, and they don't overlap, right? And they don't go over into other people's land. But the problem now, because of deforestation, some of the things they need for their rituals and customs, they cannot find there anymore. So they have to walk further, travel further, and sometimes they can only be found in other people's land. That they can, you know, have some other, you know, they can go over and try to ask for the resource. But coming back to this, so this is one, so what they have done, when they do this kind of documentation, they have been able to take logging companies to court, and for these groups, they have actually saved 61,000 hectares in the 15 years. But saying that, there's still a lot of work to be done. They cannot stop because the logging company are just coming continuously, you know, and there are land approvals being done all the time. So it's not stopping. But this is one way, but they need to do very meticulous documentation. So that's one way of how they can do work on the ground to help protect their own lands. Yeah. But you know, people who has the knowledge and the skills need to come in and help them. Yeah.
I think it's very evident from our three speakers that there are a lot of complexities and intricacies with policy making, and you definitely cannot generalize or have like a one-size-fits-all solution. And that is the theme that I see running from our three speakers. So thank you for answering that. Any other questions from the floor?
I have the mic. I'll give you guys later. Thank you, speakers, for your presentation. I think this question is specifically for Dr. Salmi. I'm a biologist myself, and something that kind of intrigued me just now was during the Group 2 presentation, Jun mentioned a great point where we need to show data-backed evidence with the government to show that the indigenous people nature-based solution does help to offset and reduce carbon emission. The issue here is there's not a lot of indigenous people in STEM to validate these practices, and sometimes when people come in or scientists come in, they may come to learn about such knowledge and did not acknowledge the community that shared these concepts to begin with. So in your perspective, how can we stop the latter? And are you involved in any project which helps to scientifically validate this traditional ecological knowledge? Thank you.
In Malaysia, problem of prior consent, I think that relates to prior consent, right? In Malaysia, we have just came up with an act, ABS, Access to Benefit Sharing, and there's like some articles in there for prior consent and all that. So this is rather recent, but it's not fully practiced. You know, it's there, but not seriously being implemented. And no one monitors, so that's a problem. So I don't think it's being widely practice is there. And if you say Malaysia has access to beneficiary, yeah, tick, you know, but nothing more than that, I guess. Then the second one, that's another thing that's why I said just now, right? I mentioned that there's very little documentation, especially from scientists. Even like for me, I jumped into this thing because I'm involved with an environmental NGO as a professional biologist. That's not really my area. I do conservation on turtles and all sorts. But I find it very intriguing. I have just actually been exposed to this like in the last couple of years, and I find it very intriguing, especially traditional ecological, because it is very, it clicks with us, you know. You can sink in your heart what traditional knowledge is. It's very, kalau in bahasa Melayu we say fitrah. It kind of like, you know, it clicks with you naturally that traditional ecological knowledge is the real thing. Because everyone, if you look at all the practices, it is sustainable, it's very gentle on the earth, and the protection, very respectful, there is sacredness to it. You, as a user of nature, is very humble. So you can see all of this, say the same theme reflecting in all the presentations earlier today. You can collect all this, you know, list of, and you can see it runs across. And so basically, if we're talking about traditional knowledge, it's about that. So to validate this, in Malaysia, not many people, a lot of people do social studies with indigenous group, but to scientifically, you know, but if you look at the traditional knowledge, is very intriguing to me because it's so ecology and it's so biology. You know, it encompasses this field very like 150%. So it's, and whatever Dr. Chi was presenting just now, you can relate, you can actually rationalize why certain animals can be hunted in summer, certain animals can be hunted in winter, or, you know, you can rationalize it scientifically actually. If you study the ecology of the animal, you can understand. It's what I was talking about when I spoke about the calendar. It is about forest phenology. If you look at it from a biological perspective, it is about phenology of the forest. It's about the process of flowering of forest trees, of fruiting. So that's the scientific way of looking at it, the phenology. But actually, really, it matches very much. So indigenous knowledge is actually indigenous science. It is a science by itself, and it's natural science. So, yeah, I don't think we need to validate it. If we, you know, for indigenous communities, they don't need to validate. They know that it's real. But if you are taking it to scientific journals, yeah, maybe you need to validate for that kind of publication. But I don't think really you need to validate it. It's already been validated for thousands of years, and with them using the resources, there's no extinction. You know, if you look at deforestation, in just a blink of an eye, everything is lost. But if you look at indigenous knowledge, for thousands of years, they've been using the same resource in the same area. No extinction, no degradation, nothing. So what does that tell you between conventional use of resource versus traditional use of resource? Very clear.
Thank you. The next question.
Okay, thank you very much. For me, very interesting, so I triggered to speak. I'm coming from Indonesia. My name is Rudy. Dr. Nurul and also Suchi and other speakers from Burma, Myanmar, Thailand, Indonesia is quite similar with the case of indigenous people, which is we are as the largest country in Southeast Asia is also having have difficult problem with, you know, legitimations and also recognitions of how we manage that together. However, this global challenge, you know, facing us, and all the countries have to fulfill 30% of. However, this is of it is protected area. 30% of it is land. However, it is global, can be more than or more or less for each countries. However, the indigenous people existence is very important. And by now, I think the one thing that we should do, scientists, collaborative management and everything, have to determine the system which is to be included in the protected area of IUCN. They have 6 criteria, six category. So indigenous people, like Suchi was mentioned, it can be called to category 6, which is traditionally used but sustainable, and it can be recognized by global level. And the most important thing too, the recognition of the policy at the national level, which is very important to, if we have endorsement is from the national law, either that law or even the constitutions is very important. I think that the way forward is like that. I mean, otherwise there will be an open access or tragedy of the common. Thank you. Comment.
Okay. So we actually have one last question from our online viewers, from a gentleman, Kun Apishai. He's actually directing this question to Dr. Shi. So he would like to ask you about like the spirit houses in Thailand right now. So most of the time, it's people are doing it. People are still doing it, but he makes an observation that it might be commodified right now, and it's lost its original, like the original meaning of it. Would you agree with this observation?
Totally, I totally do agree. Because of as I mentioned, because of we have many factors and many conditions too. So the first condition is the condition of state policy. State policy is make us change. So even we don't want to change, but you have to change. No. If, for example, like the Depotu, no? Like a born forest. Some born forest is become to schools. Some born forest is became to like a temple. Because of when they come, as I said, somehow I would like to combine I would like to re-meaning it, because they said that you believe or your practice or your customary land rights is no meaning. It's something like so. We are scared of that kind of spirit, but the external people not scared of this, because they don't understand the hidden agenda of this kind of practice. So this is we are changing. The second condition is like education. So the education system is when we go to the school, we don't have chance to learn our traditional knowledge in the school. We learn a lot of things, but sometimes we know nothing. No. So we don't know even ourselves. So that is make his observation is totally true. So I do agree with that. So we have many factors and conditions, but I just give example for a couple of reasons like that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much for that. And thank you to all of our panelists today. I feel like all of you have given us so much inspiration and also insight into your work and your livelihoods. And I feel that everyone in the audience would have learned as much as I have today. So I think there were, just to quickly summarize, 2 key takeaways from our whole panel today. The first one is on this interdisciplinary approach, the worldview that indigenous people of cultural wisdom that we have, whether it be the connection between people, culture, nature, and livelihoods, leading to like a holistic approach that we have to take towards tackling this issue. And then the second key takeaway is on equity or inclusiveness of including a lot of these people of free and prior informed consent, of taking down the stereotypes that we see of indigenous people today all around the world and how to protect the people who are most vulnerable in this issue. So because of all of that key takeaways and because we've had such a fruitful discussion today here, I would like to thank everyone here in the audience as well as our three panelists once again. And thank you all for being such attentive listeners. And now I would like to pass the microphone back to Elliot to end our session today.
Thank you once again to our speakers and to our two moderators. This was a wonderful way to end the first day, and I'm very, very grateful for having been here for this. So please, a round of applause for our speakers. I think this is a perfect capstone to our first day of the conference. Thank you all for being such a wonderful audience. Again, many of you have traveled long and very far distances to be here. Just a few brief housekeeping notes. Again, for all of the speakers, we ask that you all please come on Saturday at 9:30. I'll be sure to repeat this again tomorrow, but 9:30. And for everyone who's interested, and as I know many of you have been already, over the next 2 days, we will be selling books from the Siam Society Antiquarian Collections and from Areca. And this includes a translation of the Ramayana epic, the anthology of Southeast Asian cultural heritage, and postcard temple collection murals. So please be sure to check that out over the next 2 days, and thank you all for being such a wonderful audience.